You know what? I'm too fly for this shit. You playing yourself. All that loud talking lines, say that shit for your man. Sounds like blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, what's up, shut up.
Zeus Contralus asked, how can the Earth be flat if we see a round shape about Earth's shadow during a lunar eclipse?
So, the assertion that we see a shadow...
You don't think we are observing a shadow, Nathan? If it's not a shadow, what is it? Do you even know what a shadow is?
...is begging the question, affirming the consequent formal logical fallacy.
That's called an hypothesis, Nathan.
If the Earth is a sphere and in an orbital motion, then the Earth will obscure the Moon and it will create a shadow.
Not just that, but the fact that we can predict when and where they will be visible from, based on the orbital motion. So we have a hypothesis, we have a prediction, we have an independent variable, which is where it is in its orbit, which I'm sure everyone agrees that the Moon moves, and we have the dependent variable, based on our hypothesis and our prediction and our independent variable, the dependent variable we observe. Got any better explanations, Oakley? Or are we going to disagree with the scientific method now that it doesn't suit you?
AKA, the Moon will turn red. But let's just brush over that. Moon shadow / turns red, therefore, I affirm the consequent. Earth is a sphere in orbital motion. So it begs the question that Earth's a sphere and then puts it into a logical fallacy form that declares something you do see connects to the affirming the consequent fallacy that you've declared in the first instance that Earth is a sphere and will produce that effect.
There's lots of evidence that Earth is a sphere. You not being able to comprehend that isn't anybody's problem really but your own.
So if I take the same fallacy but take it slightly more into absurdity, I would say, if Earth's a sphere, then we will observe clouds. We observe clouds! Therefore Earth's a sphere.
The knowledge of cloud formation would show your tried to be gotcha wrong. Plus it's a false equivalence, even though you would like it to mean that.
Yeah, we do observe lunar eclipses.
We do observe lunar eclipses. What do you think eclipse means, Nathan?
That's the effect of the shadow of Earth. Well, if you want to beg the question that it is caused by that fallacy, then you could get into the fact that they claim to be shadow moves in the opposite direction to your orbital motion.
Nathan, you know, instead of doing all these shows every day, talking absolute rubbish and repeating the same thing over and over again, maybe you could actually do some research into why the shadow moves in the opposite direction.
It really boils down to how fast the Earth is spinning and how fast the Moon is orbiting around it. The Moon is orbiting about twice as fast as the Earth is spinning. So if we're looking down on the Earth and we're at the Moon, we see the Earth spinning, but the Moon is moving faster. And so that shadow is moving across the Earth this way, which is west to east.
In order that it turns red.
If you looked at the Moon over the course of a few weeks, you'd probably notice that it looks slightly different every day. The change in its shadow is based on where the Moon is in its orbit. We call this cycle the phases of the Moon, and it occurs roughly once a month. At least twice a year, however, something quite different happens. The Moon passes through the shadow cast by the Earth, causing it to look extremely unusual for a short period of time. From the Earth, the Moon will appear to darken and turn a deep red before eventually returning to normal. This is called a lunar eclipse. If we were to look at what happens from space during an eclipse, it would go something like this. First, the Moon passes through what's called the penumbra, where the Sun's light is only partially obscured. This results in only a slight darkening of the Moon. As the Moon continues along its path, however, it enters what's called the umbra, where all direct light from the Sun is blocked. But if the Sun is blocked, why does the Moon turn red? When light from the Sun goes by the side of the Earth, it passes through a long and thick layer of Earth's atmosphere. Shorter wavelengths of sunlight, like blue, are scattered by the atmosphere, so by the time the light has finished its trip to the Moon, more of the longer wavelengths, like red, are left over. On the Earth, the same thing happens at sunset as the ground you stand on gradually passes into night. As the eclipse ends, the Moon leaves the umbra, returns to its normal color, and then leaves the penumbra, brightening and resuming its original cycle. Overall, the whole process lasts only from a few minutes to a few hours, so you'll have to be quick if you want to see it. But, as long as you're willing to stay awake, you'll catch the Moon as you won't see it too often.
Okay, so first let me shine the light behind my tank of water here. Notice how it looks totally white on the back wall here. But now watch what happens when I shine it through the liquid. It becomes this orangish red color, almost the exact color of a sunset. But you'll notice the liquid itself is still bright blue. So the liquid is blue and the light going through it ends up red. The same thing happens if I shine the light at the camera. Notice how it's this bright white up here. So here's white, move it down, and it becomes this yellowish orange red color. Notice how it starts off as this bright white here and then ends up as this reddish color. How is this happening? Why does this liquid appear blue, but the light that comes out of it look red? What's happening here is the same thing that's actually happening in the sky. These milk particles are scattering blue light, just like the air in our atmosphere scatters blue light. So this type of scattering is called Rayleigh scattering, and it's applicable for molecules the size of air molecules like nitrogen and oxygen, all the way up to particles about 1/10 the wavelength of light. So that means it's applicable to milk proteins dissolved in water. So that's why it worked in our milk water experiment as well.
There's no need. It's begging the question affirming the consequent form of logical fallacy. Right on its face. So I just point out that that's a fallacious way of reasoning. It doesn't connect that the moon turning red / what you call a shadow is caused by an orbital motion you've assumed.
Just saying something is a fallacy does not mean that it is wrong.
No amount of evidence will ever persuade an idiot. No amount of evidence, it seems. No amount of showing you 100 or 1,000 proofs will ever get your blinded eyes to see. Oh, no amount of evidence will ever persuade an idiot. No amount of evidence, it seems. How quickly with your condemnation without real investigation sounds like ignorance to me.